Student disengagement, the rise of AI, and many other pressures on higher ed are stacking up fast. How to Change the World and Instructure just released a white paper on the power of mass experiential learning. And yes, I said it, mass experiential learning. You have to check this out. It's a roadmap for re-energizing students and building the skills they'll need in an AI-driven world. A link to part one of the white paper is in the episode description. And now, enjoy this episode sponsored by our friends at How to Change the World. Hey, everybody, it's Darren Francis with Harbinger Lane, and this is Signals in Higher Ed. Today, I've got Ron Elfseth, founder of Iron Range Engineering. Ron, thanks for joining.
Good morning, Darren. I'm very excited. I've been thinking about our conversation today all week, so I'm ready to get started.
Awesome. That's great. So, I actually do want to start with something I said a little offline because, as you know, when I create the questions, I use my little intern Claude to help me create the questions. And I was just noticing and remarking that this is a definition of Iron Range Engineering. Iron Range Engineering takes community college graduates, scaffolds them through a project-based experience, and then sends them into long-form work-based learning with industry partners. The result has earned national recognition and is now being expanded into new institutions and new degree programs. True or false?
True.
Amazing. I think we're done.
Okay,
What a great
that's a wrap.
that's a wrap. Well, I kind of wanted to start there. We're going to get into your background, but I kind of wanted to start there because truly, if you took engineering out of that and you just talked about something that takes community college students through project-based experience, then into long-form work-based learning with industry partners, truly could be anything. I mean, and I think that's the piece that I want other academic leaders to lean into in this conversation. We're talking about a very progressive program that you've developed over the years in engineering. But as I think about the moment we're in and the sort of demands on the workforce today and on institutions, I just think this kind of I think we're going to see that this applies beyond engineering as well. That's my thesis anyway, going into this conversation. But why don't we back up and take us back to an early version of you in engineering education? What pulled you into this work? What made you want to get into the instructional side? Yeah,
Sure.
talk there.
Well, I grew up in a family of educators, and I really liked the lifestyle. When I was an undergraduate, I had an opportunity to join the U.S. Navy, and my active duty time would be spent teaching undergraduate engineering courses to the people who would ultimately run our nuclear reactors. So I was teaching at the nuclear power school. I was teaching engineering fundamentals, thermodynamics, fluid mechanics, heat transfer. I was able to do that with just my undergraduate degree at age 21 to find out if teaching was really my life's work, and it absolutely was. I fell in love with teaching. I did that for 4 years in the Navy. I got a master's degree while teaching for the Navy, and then found my way to a community college engineering program, and just felt this deep desire to have that be my life's work.
Yeah. At what point did you start to um, maybe become dissatisfied with or start to challenge sort of the existing modality of
Yeah, that's a
teaching?
great question. So I taught undergraduate engineering for 37 years. And those first 4 years were really kind of forming my desire to do this. Then I got into a community college, and our students would do 2 years with us, and then they would transfer to a regional university and complete a bachelor's degree in engineering. As I went through those next 10, 15 years, and we were first on a quarter system, I would teach a course fall quarter, give a final exam. My students would do great. I would go into Thanksgiving break, and I'd feel awesome about everything they learned. And then we'd come back, less than a week later, and move on to the next course, where the prerequisite knowledge was just a week ago, and there would be so little transfer.
Mm.
Students were not while they could perform on exams, they had not internalized the knowledge. And we kind of had to start over. And I saw that time after time. I was teaching the way I had been taught. I was energetic. I enjoyed going to class, but it became clear that while the students could pass exams, they were not internalizing knowledge that they could use to bring value in their profession. And that dissatisfaction, was a seed that got planted in the spring, and by midsummer, I was very dissatisfied because it just wasn't working.
Yeah, yeah. So then take us into the formation of Iron Mountain, and how
Iron,
did that even? I'm sorry,
sure,
Iron Mountain. No, I mean Iron Range Engineering.
that's okay.
How did that come about?
Well, in the late 90s, early 2000s, I was lucky enough to get together with a group of 5 or 6 other people from around the country to start dreaming about what could an experiential learning model look like. And one of those people is a young man that I met as an undergrad in the 80s, Dan Ewert. And he and I linked together. We found some funding. We found a model at Aalborg University in Denmark of project-based learning, where there was a project sitting at the center of every semester's learning. And we started Iron Range Engineering in 2009 as a project-based model for community college graduates. So that we had them for 4 semesters of their junior and senior year, and they would be on vertically integrated teams, so some seniors, some juniors, and they would solve a problem for a company while developing their professional skills semester after semester and acquiring the technical knowledge they needed to become engineers and to solve the problem. And we brought that forward. And after just a few years, we were ABET accredited. ABET even recognized us with their innovation award in that project-based model.
Wow. What would you say would be like I don't know, your proudest moments in those first several years? What stood out?
Um, well, I think the proudest moments across my entire career have always been when a student finds success and then comes back and shares that success with us. We had 14 students in the very first cohort at Iron Range Engineering, and at graduation, they all had jobs. We started getting feedback from their employers that these people were coming to work much more ready to perform as engineers and bring value to their organizations. I watched one of your recent podcasts, Pegasix, and that they talked about that dissatisfaction that employers have with new graduates. And we were way back in 2009, 10, 11, starting to see that dissatisfaction go away. And so, yeah, that in those early years, students getting employment, having success, employers giving us that feedback, and then those students really growing very quickly in their careers, becoming professional engineers, getting master's degrees, becoming managers, etc.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's the ultimate test we ought to be looking at, right? Is that combination of did the student feel like they got what they needed? Did the employer validate that? Did they go on to get meaningful work and advance in that? That's a wonderful testimony. And starting out of the community college space is really interesting. I mean, um, I guess I'd want to note that too. So in the community college space, your entry requirements uh, are quite liberal, and so like, um, was there a high degree of dropout?
Uh-huh.
Uh, was there, um, I don't know, maybe early problems with students needing to develop at a faster pace, or how did you experience the community college
Well,
student or
I've
engineering
got
program?
that's a great question. I'll answer it from a couple perspectives. I'll start with The answer is no. We did not have high dropout rates. We did not have a lot of problems. Um, it's really engineering for everybody. There's a rock star in engineering education. Her name is Sherry Shepard, and she spent her career at Stanford. She wrote a letter of nomination for us for an award a few years back. And one line from that has just always stuck with me. And she said, what we do at Iron Range is we take normal people and help them become engineers, as opposed to 1,600 ACT or 1,600 SAT students and empower them to become engineers. No, you know, the people who walk in the door of a community college walked out of Iron Range Engineering with degrees as value contributors in their organizations, and it's not just some higher echelon of people who would have succeeded under any model.
Right, right. No, I think that's so key here, and I think for those that have sort of been paying attention to uh, this podcast as we've explored experiential learning, this is probably the brightest example that I can think of. But I feel like what we've been saying in different corners of academia all along is that experiential learning is this great equalizer. Um, you
Absolutely.
know, and it's amazing to see it in such a technical field um, uh, advance like this. So that's great. Well, let's jump then into um, so Iron Range ran one way for almost a decade and then changed in a fundamental way. Talk about that. What was the change and what forced the change?
Sure. Give me just a second to go back because I said I wanted to answer from two perspectives, and I don't want our listeners to say, "Well, what was his other perspective?"
Oh,
On the
please.
community college entrance, real early at our community college, we started going into a block scheduling, like half semesters, so that students who needed to catch up in math could catch up in the first year or even the first semester. And otherwise, like when you start an engineering program at most universities, if you have to take pre-calc, you've just set yourself a 5-year path. We were able to get rid of that at our community college. So another equalizer.
Right,
All right,
right. Oh, excellent. Yeah. Thank you
let
for
me,
that.
no problem. Let me jump to your question. It's a great story. There's a woman who is now one of our leaders at Iron Range Engineering, and she was in our first cohort way back 2009. Her name is Christine. She had gone through semester one, semester two, semester three, and now she's entering her final semester as a student engineer. And she came to me and she said, "Ron, uh, I had a summer internship at the mine, and they want me to stay on as a co-op and do my last semester instead of as a project at the college on an engineering team at the mine, iron mine." And my response to her was, "Sorry, Christine, we can't do that." Well, then Christine asked the ultimate question: why or why not? And I didn't have a good answer. So
Right.
we kind of figured out how to do it. And there was something that happened in Christine in that one semester. Her motivation to learn went up.
Hmm.
Her identity as an engineer increased greatly. And there was something about that experience that stuck with me. So very quickly, students were almost all of them were doing their last semester instead of as a project on campus. They were going into a company and doing it on co-op, and we saw this jump in performance, motivation, um, and imposter syndrome for a lot of students melted away. So we knew right then that there was something more out there. I'll pause, let you react, and then we can take it to, well, what happened next?
Yeah. No, not at all something that you would anticipate front loading such an experience. Seems like a big leap of faith, I guess.
Well, many times in my career, I mistakenly thought we've arrived. And with that project-based learning, we thought we'd arrived because it was experiential. Students were succeeding. Things were happening, all very positive. But then we found out there's another level. And yeah.
That's awesome. So yeah, so then what happened?
Okay, well, I mentioned that our project-based model was inspired by Aalborg University in Denmark. Our work-based model was inspired by a university in Australia called Charles Sturt University, where in this same time frame, 2016, 17, 18, they were starting up a work-based model. Now, it was a 5-year program. The students would spend the first year and a half after high school on campus in a project-based mode, and then they would go out for 3.5 years in a work-based environment and they would get a master's degree in civil engineering. That model inspired us. It was like, we've been doing this project-based model. It's been working. We've been seeing the success on co-op. Is there a way to take the co-op and make it be the predominant model? And we started brainstorming. We ran a pilot, and our first pilot was in 2019. We ran the two programs side by side for about a year and a half, and then we realized, okay, proof of concept. We're going to stop the project-based model and have everything be the work-based model. Let me just take a second to talk through the stages. Student does their 2 years of lower division at a community college anywhere in the country. We have students from coast to coast, border to border. Then they come on campus for a 1 semester project-based boot camp. A place to develop the skills they need so that when they get to their co-op, they're value added. They don't get fired. They know where to sit at their first board meeting. They know how to act like a student engineer. And then they go out on 24 months of work-based placements, continue to take courses in the evenings and on weekends to finish their technical content. And after 4.5 years now, those 3 different segments, lower division, we call it the Bell Academy. So we've got that academy in the middle, and then 2 full years, 24 months of work-based placement.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I mean, it it makes a ton of sense. Um, how you how you arrived at it is maybe beside the point, but it feels as though, um, as you describe it, it feels as though this is clearly the model that we should be using. What do you think is the if you had to guess, what do you think the holdout is more broadly in engineering programs around the world today? Um, is it that they haven't heard of this? Is it that, as you mentioned before, they're already kind of recruiting really bright students who are going to be great engineers anyway, and so their output is relatively decent as it is? Um, I'm just curious, like at this stage, we're talking decades now. You've seen such tremendous success. Is there a resistance at the institution level to pull something like this off? And did you see resistance to it as you were building it?
We had a ton of resistance. It it there's so much inertia in higher education, in engineering in higher education. It's kind of one of the craziest things that I ponder about often. We have engineering, which is at the leading edge, bleeding edge of innovation. I've got my iPhone 17 here. Well, look at all of the improvements from the very first iPhone to iPhone 17. The profession is all about innovation, but the education system hasn't changed in more than half of a century.
Right.
So that's figure that out. One of the one of the, I would say, biggest resistances are the faculty. Um, the role of a faculty member in a work-based model, and we've got our model at Iron Range Engineering. I'm working with the South Dakota School of Mines, where we're just now designing what could be a future bachelor's degree in engineering. We've already got on the books a master's degree in engineering, both of these experiential, and we're going to do a bachelor's of science in engineering technology. And at the University of Illinois Springfield, we're starting up a bachelor's of science in engineering technology. So this is happening, but the professors are no longer guiding the learning, telling the students what to learn and how well they're learning it. Instead, we're coaches. We have to change from being the expert to the student being the expert and helping guide them to how do they validate their expertise to me. They know something I don't know. I have to be comfortable with that. I have to guide them to be a professional person. And if you ask most engineering professors, do they have any responsibility to develop the student as a professional? They'll say, no, that's not my job. I don't even know how to do it. A lot of them will say. So you've got a group of faculty, 90% of whom have no desire to help these students become emerging professionals. And yet in our models, Iron Range, South Dakota, Illinois, the faculty have to be guides. They have to be coaches, mentors. And I think that's a huge part of the resistance.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, and I can imagine anything that is credit bearing has tremendous complexity uh, to make changes to. Um, so let's talk a little bit about. There's a lot of conversation right now about whether traditional assessment still um, tells us anything meaningful, especially with AI in the picture. How do you actually know whether a student in your program understands what they're supposed to understand?
Well, you asked me two questions. Let's go to the first one.
Yeah,
Traditional assessment, is it useful today? I don't think it was useful in the 1980s.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Fair.
I had solved problems out of the back of a textbook for which there was one answer, and there was only usually one path to that answer. And then I stopped because I got the answer. The world of engineering doesn't exist like that. There are complex problems to which there are many answers and many paths to the answer. They are open-ended. They are so nuanced. And yet in the education, we spend all this time just getting to the closed solution. In fact, the licensing exams, even the professional engineering licensing exam, is just that, a multiple choice exam. I think that is a very narrow assessment of what an engineer needs in a 360-degree world. So is it working today? No. But was it working yesterday? No.
Yeah.
What has changed is now your friend Claude can do my closed-ended problems for me. And I don't need to have my emerging engineers spend all their time doing that. I think what it opens up in a very big way is what our emerging engineers should be doing at universities across the country and the world right now, are learning how to validate when an answer is given. How do we know what engineering principles can we use to demonstrate that the answers are valid? So your second question is, well, how do we do this at Iron Range? Well, we've been doing it the same way since 2009. We're not into written exams where students are doing that and giving us a multiple choice answer. Instead, we have students stand before us at whiteboards and do engineering problems and talk through the solution and talk through the validation and the choices they're making and why they're making those choices. When a student does that, an AI solution does not bring them any value. It does not help them demonstrate their understanding. So we call them verbal exams, and a student will do. Well, I went to our graduation a few days ago, and the woman giving the graduate giving the graduation speech gave a number of how many times she had to do this, and it was in the hundreds
Hmm.
in her 2 years of having to verbally demonstrate her knowledge to a professor.
Wow. Wow. Very strong. Very strong experience. I guess where I want to imagine together is, as I hear you describe engineering from your perspective at Iron Range, um, I feel like you're describing a creative process. I feel like you're describing what entrepreneurs need when they're trying to work out a problem and solve, and as they're building a new company, whether it be a tech company or not. Um, and it strikes me that entrepreneurship and engineering have a lot more in common, at least in the world that you've developed to help someone gain mastery over something like engineering. Um, where do you feel you could almost lift the model and set it in place outside of engineering? Like where else do you feel like this would be a no-brainer to
Sure.
experiment with?
Well, I want to comment on your thought about entrepreneurship. Uh, Danny, Ewert, I mentioned him earlier, created a model of experiential learning that he calls IBL, innovation-based learning. And in that model, yeah, of project-based learning, it is all about students creating value and new knowledge. And the number of startups that come out of an experience like that, where the focus is on value creation and new knowledge creation, it is very, very powerful, and it is what engineers do. So I just want to
Yeah.
emphasize your comment there. Um, well, when I recruit for Iron Range Engineering, and I'm trying to explain to these community college students in Houston or Tucson or Bellingham, Washington, how our model works, I use an analogy. And my analogy is student teaching for pre-teacher education. My wife, and like I said, I grew up in a family of elementary teachers. My wife was an elementary teacher. And I bring up student teaching. Now, student teaching is this experiential model, usually at for the very last semester of a student's 4-year education. Well, these community college engineering students or student engineers, they know what that is. They can relate to it. And then I say, well, there are two problems with student teaching. The first one is they only get to do it for one semester, and it's at the very end. We think that you should be able to do it for much longer than that. And in fact, our students do it for 24 months. The other problem with student teaching is they don't get paid. And our students get paid. They make more than $50,000 a year for their last 2 years of college. So I think K-12 teacher prep could move to a very much an Iron Range type model where students can bring value and practice their craft while learning methods for a much longer period of time than that last semester. And now I think you could, nursing, I think, has been doing this all along.
Mhm.
That they spend time out in the field learning how to be a nurse by doing nursing. One of our taglines at Iron Range has always been learning how to be an engineer by doing engineering. I don't think there's really a limit. I think you could just go down learning how to be an accountant by doing accounting and just move it along. I think it could permeate all of higher education.
Yeah, it feels as though that's the case. I wonder if you could, for the audience, I just want you to describe the three-legged stool that you described to me the other day.
Yeah, no, I think that's very important. Um, when I think of being an engineer, I like to think of it in three domains. Um, there's the act of doing engineering, and that is uh, solving an open-ended problem, completing a project. In engineering education or in engineering, we call that design. So you're designing a solution, you're designing a product. So we have one leg of the stool that is the act of doing, and that is design. Now, to do design, I need to have a technical background, a technical baseline of knowledge in engineering fundamentals to be able to apply those fundamentals, which is basically for the physical world around us, to my solutions. I mean, that's really the difference between a tinkerer. Some of the best engineers never had a formal education. They were really good at solving the problem, but they didn't have those engineering fundamentals to apply to their solutions. Our graduating engineers across the country need those fundamentals. There's another leg to the stool. Technical design, the most important one, I call the professional leg. It's it's learning how to represent yourself well, represent your organization well, speak, communicate your solutions, act ethically, perform on a team, be a leader. When students graduate without having spent much time in this professional realm, they get out into industry and they stub their toes, they have faux pas, they feel uncomfortable. It contributes to imposter syndrome. They don't represent themselves well. So when you put all three of these together and you focus on developing the individual's technical content, their design abilities, and their professional skills, now you've got a graduate who can go out and bring value right away.
That's great, and I have to, because we're talking in the higher ed context. I want to bring it back to assessment for a moment because um, I can see how you assess some of this. Um, but what's important to assess in this model, and is assessment even the right term? Because really, at the end of the day, what the end goal for these students is to complete the program, enter into a uh, a long term employment scenario and progress uh, from there. So, talk a little more about like your sense of where assessment is needed and where it maybe even holds you back.
Sure. Well, one huge assessment is can the individual create value? And in when they're going through our experiences and they're documenting the work they're doing, the designs they're doing, the problems they're solving, they're documenting in such a way that they're showing the value they've created. So I think that's an important part of assessment. Um, but I think even more, one of the terms we use at Iron Range is called going around the helix. And we stole this from that woman, Sherry Shepard, that I mentioned earlier. She wrote a book in 2009 called Educating Engineers. And she talked about a spiral method. Um, for a student to develop, to, to become competent, and then move on towards expertise, they need to try something. And then they need to get feedback on it. And then they need to try it again. and then they need feedback again. And they start moving around the helix. One of the things we do at Iron Range is every semester a student gives a TED Talk. We call it an IRE talk. They do a couple during their Bell Academy. They 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 don't have much public speaking skill at the beginning, but they give a talk, and then they get feedback on what they can do better next time, and then they give another talk, and they implement some of that feedback. And well, that is assessment. It's
Yeah.
formative assessment when a professor can give a student feedback that the student can implement and become more move more towards competence. And it's across all three of those domains. I just gave a professional speaking domain, but so assessment is hugely important, and it comes from the student demonstrating their skill, knowledge, competency, getting feedback, and then acting on that feedback.
The helix is a great visual for that, um, as opposed to what I think we often imagine is something much more binary, uh, pass fail, that kind of thing. Um, uh, but maybe talk a little bit about um, your thoughts on the professional leg of the stool, where when it comes to assessment too, right? Because is that is that something where how do you facilitate that? I guess how do you facilitate the professional side, and then how do you assess that side?
Great question. One of the geniuses of the Iron Range model is that we actually have two sets of faculty. One set are PhD professors, technical experts who teach, for lack of a better word, the technical courses, give feedback to the students on their technical development. This other group of people, they're bachelor's and master's degreed engineers who've practiced in engineering. They've been that professional, and they're the ones who give feedback to the students on their professional skill. Now, we have a lot of bleed over between those two groups. They work really well together in all three domains, but it's really that professional domain that is rooted in these, we call them facilitators. They talk to the students out on placement every week or every other week with prompts to get the students to talk about what's going well, what confrontation did they have at work, what example did they have of presenting their work to a client. I would say that the key word in this, Darren, is reflection.
Hmm.
If you look at any cycle of learning, like the Kolb cycle or Dewey model, whatever, there's this part called reflection where the students have to process the learning before they can continue around the cycle. We have hundreds of scripted reflections, both written and spoken, that the students do with their professors and their facilitators to get feedback so that they can move around that helix. That's how we do it in all things, but it's really the place where the professional learning can take place.
Got it. Now wrap in for me the employer relationship, um, because I feel like that's the other that's a very delicate thing for institutions to balance is the expectations of the employer that are involved here, and like how do you identify the the right employer partners to for the longer term co-op needs, um, and then how do you integrate them, or how do you work with them, um, to assure the level of success that the students
Yeah.
need?
Um, I think this happens in a way that most people wouldn't expect. I think most people would expect that we go out and we find a company, and then that company becomes our partner, and then we provide students to that company, and that company provides a lot of uh, co-teaching while this form a formal, how much time are they going to spend educating the student? And that's not how it works. Instead, we spend an incredible amount of time during the Bell Academy helping the students become expert job seekers, become really good at interviewing and communicating how they will bring value to a company, having great resumes and LinkedIn profiles. We have 10 hours a week during the Bell Academy. It's just really spent on this. So now the student goes out and they excel in the job search process. They've already made a good impression. They get a job at any company, not just off of some list that we have, at any company wherever they want to work. We help them find those companies, but they're the ones who went and got the job. Now we connect, our facilitator connects with the supervisor at work at the beginning of the co-op and says, hey, this student's going to earn credit. We've got a few rules we like to follow. Like, we don't want them working 70 hours a week because they're also students. And we're going to ask you for some feedback along the way. And then the student goes and they do their thing. Well, if they do it well, they make a great impression. And now the company calls us and they say, I've had this happen so many times. It happened once with John Deere. Guy at John Deere called. He says, hey, Ron, we've got this guy named Aaron. He's amazing. Do you have any more Aarons? And the answer is yes, we have hundreds. So that's how it works, is the students' value that they bring to a company is what creates the relationship.
Wow. So you set that student up for that successful interaction in that earlier prep you were describing, that was it the boot camp semester?
Yep.
Is that when they're getting that level of training on how to go experience this
and throughout? Like they usually go on 3 co-ops, about 8 months each. So as they're midway through their first co-op, they're working with their learning coach, their facilitator, to take their skills and now go find their next co-op and their next co-op. So it very concentrated during the Bell Academy boot camp semester, but then around the helix to graduation.
I was talking to somebody yesterday in a different field who just expressed frustration that there was no required course in interviewing, right? And just how disadvantaged a student becomes at the end of their education with all this wonderful knowledge and background, because they're not comfortable conveying it. They're not comfortable being in that place yet. And you're giving these students multiple opportunities to go get this right.
We graduate expert job seekers, and that's a skill that will take them to the end of their career. But make no mistake, we have to do that, because if our students don't get co-ops, well, we're not going to get any more students. The whole existence of an experiential work-based program relies on the students going through the program having success getting jobs. Otherwise, why would the next student come in? They wouldn't.
Right. Yeah. It's an amazing thing to learn about. I want to be sensitive to time. I want to hit on one more thing in terms of what this means for the rest of higher ed, because we've already kind of gone into that, and I just want to circle on that. But before we go there, what did we miss today? I feel like we covered quite a bit of the program, but did we leave anything out that you feel like we should cover for the audience?
Yeah, I think so. I've been fortunate enough in the last 4 or 5 years to be a part of a group through the American Society for Engineering Education called the Mindset Report Authoring Team. And so ASEE published in 2024 a report called the Mindset Report that talks about how engineering education needs to change to compete in the future. In 2025, we published a blueprint report, and now in 2026, we're working with the National Science Foundation to spread the word here. In the mindset report, there were 34 recommendations
Hmm.
on change. There are so many barriers to success in engineering education for an incoming student. One of the things that determines the success of an engineering student is what zip code they come from and whether their high school had calculus or not. Because that's if they come from a zip code where the high school didn't have calculus, their time to graduation goes up, their likelihood to succeed goes down. Changing the future of engineering education requires looking at so many different things. And anybody that's got an interest here, if you just Google the mindset report, you can look at those 34 recommendations. We have a president at South Dakota Mines who's a visionary, and he's imagining how we're going to do this at the university level. We need more university presidents to want to embrace this report and embrace the future. Because if you don't, pretty soon you're going to look around and wonder, where did they all go? And I know the answer, because your episode with Pega 6, that's where they're all going to go. Right? So the world is changing more rapidly in engineering education than it did in the past. The mindset report is giving us a blueprint for the future, and I wanted to get that out there. So many of the things in the mindset report, we've actually been doing at Iron Range since the beginning. I'll give you one example, and then we can go to your next question. The least common denominator in engineering education is a 3-semester hour class, a 3-credit class, 135 student hours. There's a lot of diminishing returns that happens when a student takes a 3-credit class. Most professors will tell you, well, by week 10, we'd covered everything, and now that last 6 weeks, we just kind of had diminishing returns. So at Iron Range, at the beginning, we took all of our courses and made them 1 credit. Thermodynamics, not 3 credits, 1 credit. And we zero in on the fundamental principles of thermodynamics and get our students to talk they own and apply it as they continue to learn more and more about thermodynamics. So there you go. That's what we missed.
Yeah. I'm going to hold for just a second, because I think 47 minutes and 36 seconds in, there was a little bit of a freeze. I'm just looking. I think I don't know. Can you hear me okay? Maybe not. Can you hear me now?
There was a freeze. I didn't hear you for about the last 10 seconds. I can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, I think it was just, I was looking to see if it was just like an internet thing, but I think it might be fine now. Um, well, good. I think where I'd love to ask you to help us think about the future together is back on this idea of, if an institution is, engineering or not, an institution is trying to um, have greater employer alignment uh, strategies, work integrated learning, um, and they had to just start from scratch today. I mean, what does it really take to launch a work based program at a school that's never done one before? I'm sure there are schools that haven't, and um, like, what would be kind of step one from your perspective?
Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to align your curriculum with your values. So when we talked about the 3 legs of the stool, when I graduated with my undergraduate degree, my technical leg of the stool was as big around as a redwood tree, and the professional leg was a toothpick. And there wasn't even a design leg in the 80s. Today, it hasn't changed much. There is a design leg. It might be as big around as a pencil. Professional leg is still a toothpick. If your values include those domains of being an engineer, you need to put credits there. At Iron Range, 50% of our credits are technical, 25% are professional, and 25% are design. So you need to alter your curriculum to align with what you're trying to achieve. And it starts with credit breakdown. Then you have to figure out how do we get our students to acquire knowledge, process that knowledge, and document it. In a work-based model, they're out there doing their learning at work. But how do you document that so that you get technical credit or design credit or professional credit? You need to come up with models of ways that students are getting new knowledge, that they're acquiring knowledge at work and documenting it and processing it and being assessed on it. And you have to be able to do that at a distance because your students are everywhere. So we did it at Iron Range. It happened through 16 years with an amazing team of professors and facilitators. But you have to come up with a model of curriculum and then of delivery. And it has to meet your context, your social context. So it fits your students, your people, your professors. Those are the two most important things.
I appreciate that. It's great. So let's have one futuristic leaning comment here. What is your most optimistic vision for higher education 5 years from now? And you can stay within the field of engineering to keep it concrete to just what you've been building, because I think it'll still apply to some degree elsewhere as well.
I think my most optimistic view is that there are personalized pathways through education. The engineering education of the past and of today is too much of a cookie cutter. Everybody has to do the same things and come out with some imagined same set of knowledge. And I think with AI tutors and experiential learning, every student can have this different path that allows them to graduate competently and able to bring value to their organization through a set of experiences that are very, very much attuned to their desires and their own pathway that they chose. So personalized learning, I think, is one of the grand challenges, actually.
Yeah. No, I love it. I think a future where it truly is personalized to the betterment of all students is a great framing for what the future could look like. Thanks for having the time to put into this today, Ron. I really appreciate being able to speak with you more about it, and look forward to seeing what you guys are doing as you continue to expand this elsewhere.
All right. Thank you very much, Darren. It's been a pleasure.